have the chance to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Peter FACIONE. Dr. FACIONE is a principal at Measured Reasons LLC, a Los Angeles-based research and consulting firm supporting excellence in strategic thinking and leadership decision-making. In private business, Dr. FACIONE has worked as a strategic consultant and as managing partner of the California Academic Press. Dr. FACIONE's consulting work has included long-term and short-term projects for several branches of the U.S. military, various NGOs, and government agencies, professional associations, national labs, and over 60 public and private universities and colleges throughout the U.S. and around the world. Dr. FACIONE maintains an active speaking, writing, consulting, and research agenda with well over 150 publications, including essays, books, articles, case studies, and educational testing tools, which are used all around the world. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Peter FACIONE.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon. I ask your forgiveness. I'm going to have to speak in English, porque mi español es muy mal. So lo siento. Also, I'm going to have two simple ideas that are the themes that run through this presentation. One simple idea is to try to make sense out of the conversation we have all heard for the past few years that people in the world of business are involved in or interested in or would like to know more about critical thinking. That's not an easy conversation because there is confusion on both sides in the academic world and in the business world about how critical thinking and leadership decision-making are connected. So I'm going to try to work on that problem a little bit in this presentation. And the second thing I'm going to work on in this presentation is a series of concerns that have come to my attention over the past 40 years that I have been doing this consulting work. And I have observed many times, many places, that there is a fundamental difference between what businesses say that they are interested in, especially in the qualities of the people they hire, and how businesses hire people, so that they consistently are unable to connect how they hire, in my opinion, with what they wish to hire. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to bridge that problem. So please bear with me if I go too fast, because I see many of you are listening to translation. Just raise your hand and I will try to slow down so the translator can catch up. In all of business, all of us who work in this field, we love measurement. And we love to measure many, many things, things that you might think are almost impossible to measure. But I'm sure you have heard of all of these expressions: our cost per unit, our revenue per month, and so on. We measure things like client satisfaction. You must have all seen these little questionnaires at every hotel, every restaurant. We very much are concerned to measure workplace safety, because if there are accidents at the workplace, they're not only difficult for the employee who has the accident or the client, but also they cost the company lots of money. But we measure other things like product shelf life. How many times people visit our website? How many times they click through our website? How many emails that we send in a marketing campaign are actually opened? And on and on and on. We in business measure everything. We love to measure. But do we measure things that really matter? In my work as a consultant, I sometimes discover that businesses measure things that they can measure, even if they omit measuring things that they should measure. My proposal to business, of course, is to measure what matters, and I'm speaking now mostly to medium-sized and small businesses, which are the great majority of businesses in the world, because I know that many big businesses already manage this. And here are my concerns. Let me share them with you. This comes from all the years that I've been working as a consultant. My first concern is that when a business is looking to hire someone at any level, from the very top to the very bottom, the business often fails to include objective measures of key skills and attributes. They often fail to do this. And we'll talk about what they do measure in a moment, but this is something they leave out. Secondly, when they're interviewing the finalists, the businesses often fail to obtain a demonstration that the finalists actually have the skills and the attributes that are important. And I would say this is particularly true in education. Particularly in education, we fail during the interview to get the data that would show that the persons we're interviewing will be successful as teachers and scholars. But it's also true in business too. We fail to get the data that shows that they can be good managers or good executives. And finally, once we've hired people, we often fail to cultivate in those people the skills and the attributes that we most treasure. Again, I'll give my first example from education. Many times you will see that a colleague is moved to a position of being a program director or a department head in a university or college. But there's no program in that university or college to help that person be successful as a department head or program director. And that is a set of skills and a set of attributes that's very different than the set the person needed to be successful as a teacher or a scholar. And we've all experienced this. Let me simplify it, at the risk of making it even too simple. Let's imagine there are 3 overlapping domains that we are concerned about when we like to hire someone. One we call knowledge, one we call attributes or mindset or attitudes, and one we call skills. And I'm going to suggest that if we can find candidates who have all 3, we're very excited. We'd love very much to hire that candidate, make that candidate be a manager, put that candidate in charge of a project. Let's start with looking at the attributes. What are some of the attributes? And let's focus to make it simple on the chief executive, the CEO, the person at the top of the organization. One leadership attribute is foresight. We want a CEO who can anticipate problems. Not like this duck. This would be a bad CEO, because there come the workers, and the duck is not paying attention to the problems, and sadly, look what happened. A good leader, among other things, anticipates problems. By the way, perhaps you can see that one little duckling did make it across. Perhaps it was sheer luck. Another thing we want in our leaders, we want them to be creative, innovative, and resilient. Leaders have to help us adapt to changing situations. When I work with the military, I find that these are really valuable characteristics because, as you're well aware, if you're involved in a military situation, a military mission, the problem is changing dynamically as you act and as the enemy acts. And the successful military leader is capable of responding creatively and innovatively and resiliently no matter how the problem changes and becomes more difficult. The same is true in business. When I have served as the chief of a business, when I have served as a consultant to the chief of a business, the same is true. We must be resilient and creative and innovative. And the word that I often hear used in English is the word nimble, like a dancer, able to move quickly through complex problems. Well, we seek many things in a leader, and to go through each one individually would take too long. So I just made a list of things that we know we seek. We usually want someone as our leader who is courageous, but also objective. We want someone who is honest and speaks the truth. We want someone, as we said earlier, who can anticipate consequences. We want someone who is a professional, conducts themselves and sets a tone of our organization as a professional organization. This is true in universities and colleges and schools, in healthcare agencies, in the military, in businesses, in government. We want people who are leaders who are vigorous and have the drive to excel and to achieve excellence. We certainly don't want leaders who are apathetic. We want someone who is mature in their judgment, someone who understands that sometimes you have to make a decision with incomplete information. Sometimes you have to stay the course, even if things get tough. Sometimes you have to revise and reconsider. So they need maturity of judgment. We certainly want someone who's tolerant of diversity in the workplace. We want someone who is incisive and can make the hard decisions. And I recall once in my career, it was my responsibility to cut several $1 million out of a budget. And if we didn't cut this budget, the whole organization would suffer. And I was brought in and given a position specifically for that purpose. And that wasn't an easy chore. Everyone likes to be liked. And certainly by cutting several $1 million out of an organization's budget, you're not going to be a popular person. Not the second day. And yet, without that characteristic of being able to make that tough decision, the whole organization would die, everyone would lose their jobs, all the clients would not be served. So we need that in a leader too. And we also need the leader who, as we said earlier, is resilient and creative and innovative. And one thing we also need, and it's in addition to all these other things, we need a leader who people will follow, who can motivate, who can get other people to do their best, so that people feel good about themselves and want to contribute and participate for the good of the organization. Well, suppose we were going to hire a chief executive, and we got all the resumes, and we found that we had several semifinalists for this C-suite position. C as in chief executive, could be chief financial officer, could be chief information officer, or chief operating officer, C-suite. And the persons show us their resume, and yes, they've got solid educational credentials, several years of management experience, evidence of prior success, glowing references, marvelous recommendations, no criminal record. We check this. No known legal issues. We check that. No workplace prior problems that we can discover. Everyone we will interview knows how to interview. Are you following me in this idea? People who want these jobs literally practice how to interview. They know which questions you're going to ask. They have practiced their answers. They know how to interview. They claim that they have all of those attributes that we saw in the earlier slide, all 10. They claim that in addition to that, they have wonderful skills in solving problems and communicating. And that's the problem. They only claim it. We don't have any evidence of that. We really don't. The education credentials? Perhaps, perhaps not. We know of people who have come from wonderful universities who are not very good. We know of people who come from not very good universities who are wonderful. We know that a person's life circumstance can prevent them from going to that wonderful university because perhaps they have a family or children or a spouse who's working, and so they can't take themselves to that wonderful university, but they are a wonderful person. We should be looking at them. You know, education is not a good substitute for the attributes and skills. Years of management experience is not a good substitute. Perhaps they were simply managing in an organization that was doing well, and they were there during that time. Lucky them. It doesn't mean that they were the reason the place was successful. At best, it means it didn't collapse while they were there. And I could go through the rest of the list, because we all know that these are markers, but they're not completely definitive markers with regards to the attributes and skills. And these, again, are the 10 attributes that I listed. If you want to take a picture of this slide, go ahead. They're all 10 there. Honorable, driven, motivational, innovative, tolerant, professional, mature in judgment, discerning, foresightful, and incisive. And these are in a circle because we don't know which is more important than the other. And we know no human being has all 10, really. Probably not even Jesus. We know that it's very difficult. If you have a few of these, you're a wonderful person. So we did some work, my research team, with some executives many years ago. We developed a way to measure those 10 things. Those are the 10 things. We found a way to measure these 10 things. And our measurement produces results that will list for each of the 10 whether the candidate has this in a strong way, in a strong positive way, or has them in a positive way, or frankly, we're just not sure. And here truly is one person's scores. We have many of these scores. This is one person's scores. And this person had all those other things on their resume, their experience, letters, all those things. This is one person's score. This person claimed they had all 10. But we could not find evidence of 5 of them. Now, if you wish, you can interview this person and hire this person, if you wish. But many businesses would look at this, who use our tools, and say, let's skip this person and go to the next person and maybe interview that person. Because we don't want to bring in a chief executive that doesn't show that they are discerning and honorable, professional, judicious, and tolerant. Perhaps they are, but they aren't showing it right now, and they probably are showing us their best right now. It'll get worse after they're here. So we'll pass on to the next candidate. Okay, so we talked a little bit about attributes, and we measure those. Now let's talk about the skills. Again, the same list we saw earlier. The person who are finalists, they have all these wonderful things in their resume. And they claim that they have excellent communication and critical thinking skills, excellent quantitative reasoning skills. They claim this. I've never read a letter of application that did not claim this. If you have read a letter that says to you, I'm a wonderful person, but I cannot think, I did not see that letter ever. Well, let's digress for just a moment and unpack this. Because we always ask for this in our job descriptions. We always ask for people who have strong thinking skills and communication skills. What exactly are we asking for? We're asking for people who can wrestle with problems. And why are we doing that? Because at the leadership level, and frankly at every level of an organization, especially in a service economy, every level of an organization, people have to wrestle with problems. Even if it's the problem that a person calls on the telephone and says, I'm having difficulty with your product. Every level has to deal with problems. The leader has to deal with problems. The leader must be able to analyze the environment and figure out what the problem is, get the problem right. You know, we're wonderful as human beings. We have a million solutions. And as soon as we decide what we think the problem is, we apply a solution. Our challenge is that we often get the problem wrong. And so we apply a solution that doesn't work. For a leader, it's vital to get the problem right. So they have to interpret events and understand the facts. They have to make an inference. They have to project what will happen. If we use this option, if we use this option, if we create a new option, what will happen? What will happen to the clients? What will happen to the business? What will happen to our economic situation? Short-term, long-term, our stockholders, they have to make a lot of inferences about what will happen. They have to make decisions involving risk and uncertainty. Their subordinates will tell them, if we do this, we risk this, but we could gain that. And they'd ask their subordinates, well, what are the probabilities? And the subordinates often do not know the probabilities. Or they overestimate the potential success and underestimate the potential risk. And the leader has to make their thinking accommodate to this very confusing environment where there are risks and opportunities in many different directions with not very accurate information quite often. And so they have to assess or evaluate their options. They have to evaluate their opportunities, and ultimately they have to explain themselves. And this is perhaps the most challenging thing for a leader, because it's difficult to motivate people if you can't explain to people why you want them to do whatever it is you want them to do. They have to explain, this is how I see the problem, these are the opportunities I see, this is what we're going to do, this is why this option is the best one for our business. And that is how you motivate your team to participate with you. It's not good enough, like a character in a movie, to be lucky and just get the right answer. That doesn't motivate people. It worries people. You have to explain to people how you got where you are and how you're going to move forward. And finally, the leader must be metacognitive. I'll use the academic word. I'll use a business word. The leader must double check, must make sure. Did I skip anything? Should I revisit anything? Should I get more information? Now I'm going to put some words next to these words on the same slide so you can see them. These are the key verbs: analyze, interpret, infer, evaluate, explain, and review, or self-correct. Why those words? Why those words? Those words are academic words. They are not words that connect well with the business community. Words that connect well with the business community are these words. I must understand the critical elements in my problems. I must assess my options. I must see the logical consequences of my solutions and my opportunities. I must evaluate the risks and uncertainties, and I must be able to present a quantitative analysis and a good explanation of what we're going to do. These words are words that resonate in the business community, but they say the same things as the academic words on the right. It's the same ideas, different words. I want to show you some scores. This is a candidate we tested for skills. This particular test enables a person to score a number of points, and their score can be described as strong if it has a high number of points, and those are the 5 skills that are the ones that are the way the business community would describe them. I'll show you the academic description in a moment. And these are the person's scores. And this person was strong on all the skills, and as a matter of fact, superior on the skill of navigating through decisions and problems that involved uncertainty. The tool that we used for this is called the Insight Executive Decision-Making Skills Test. It's the other pair of the earlier test that measures the attributes. And this would be a candidate you would want to hire, or not hire, you'd want to interview. You definitely want to interview this candidate. Now, if this candidate had the attributes of the other candidate, you might skip it. But on the skills side, you'd want to interview this person, especially if your business was in trouble. There are other scores you can get on this instrument. They range from superior to strong to moderate, and again, to not manifested. You never know if someone has some skills in that particular day. They couldn't show those skills to you. That would be unfortunate, but that's also a possibility. Now, here are the academic words again. And this image might be familiar to some of you. This image has been used for 25 years. This image has those same words: analysis, evaluation, inference, explanation. Instead of review, it uses self-regulation. And it's an image that characterizes a concept that in academia is called critical thinking, purposeful reflective judgment. And this, I believe, is the moment when I first saw this, I could see the connection between what academics and university faculty are interested in helping students to develop critical thinking and what business leaders and managers and professionals want. They want the same thing, but they sometimes use different words to talk about those things. On the academic side, critical thinking is a process of reflective judgment. We know it's a process that we're teaching when we teach students critical thinking. We know in this process, the students are wrestling with problems where they must use reasoned consideration. And I could say these same descriptions applying to the leaders of a business. The leaders must reflect on the problems they have to deal with. They must use a process of good judgment. They must give reasoned consideration. And ultimately, just like our students, the leader of a big company must decide what to believe, what is the problem, and what to do. Where should we go to move forward as a business? A very strong connection between critical thinking and business leadership decision-making skills. Now, what happens when critical thinking fails? What happens? Suppose in your own life, or in the life of your children, or in the life of your business, critical thinking fails. In the years we've been doing this work, we've made a short list of some of the results of what happens when critical thinking fails. People die, businesses lose revenue, law enforcement is ineffective, people lose their jobs, voters are deceived, communication is garbled, there are combat casualties that didn't need to happen, there are bad decisions, financial mismanagement. I could go on and on and on. Critical thinking fails. We all try to tell our children to think before they act because we know the risks that it would be involved if they don't use their heads before they make some decisions, especially when they're teenagers. And we tell the same thing to business leaders. Before you make the decision, before you shoot from the hip, stop and think a little bit. Okay, skills, attributes. How do we learn something that involves skills and attributes? Well, we all know the answer to that because we've all learned things that involve skills and attributes. Some of us learned sports, some of us learned music, some of us learned management, some of us learned science, and so on. Skills and attributes are learned by practice and reflection. Practice and reflection. By a good leader, a good manager helping us go from being confused. You remember your first day on a job, confused, disorganized, overwhelmed, ineffective, your first day teaching, your first day managing. Then a couple of years later, you're immediate, focused, disciplined, and successful. It's because you developed the skills and the attributes, not just the knowledge. Matter of fact, the knowledge, which is the third bubble in that group of 3 bubbles, we haven't even talked about that yet. The knowledge is the easiest piece, and it's the one you don't need until you get there, and we'll give it to you. It's the skills and the attributes you need to be a manager and a leader. So what happens? At every level of an organization, we try to train pattern recognition and reasoned response to pattern recognition so people can see similar problems, pattern recognition, understand similar consequences, and more quickly respond with good advice. I understand your problem when you called on the phone. I've had 3 people call today with the same problem. Today was the day, or last night was the night, that Oracle set out a new update to Java, and this morning the phones light up because everybody's computer doesn't work, because Oracle didn't care, and Java on their computers doesn't work, so they call all their companies to figure out what happens. And every tech person has to know how to deal with the Java update that Oracle put out all over the world last night. You've all been there. By the way, get ready for Windows 10 this summer. So we see a pattern, and we try to respond to the pattern by being reasoned and by practicing our responses. But you know what's going to happen. This summer, Windows 10 is going to come out. We're all going to have trouble. We're all going to make a phone call. And 99% of us are going to be successfully helped. But one of us out of 100 is going to make a phone call, and our problem isn't going to be Windows 10. Our problem is going to be something else. And we just hope that when that one person calls, that the person on the other side who's trained to respond is a good thinker. Because if they're a good thinker, they're going to realize, oh, you're that one person who doesn't have a problem with Windows 10, yours is different, and I can help you too. But if they're not a good thinker, they'll try to fix the wrong problem, just like I said earlier, and they'll cause a great deal of trouble for that person. And one person out of 100 is a lot of people out of millions. We note relationships. We become sensitive to minor variations. We reflect on our past experiences, and we practice, practice, practice. Practice again. Develop our thinking skills and our attributes. And I wish whoever was practicing would have practiced with a ventilator to turn the air conditioning on in this room, because the temperature is getting warm in here. One of the things that we practice with successfully in businesses and in healthcare and in the military, but I'm surprised we don't do it enough in education, is case studies and scenarios. It is such a treat and such a pleasure to teach with case studies and scenarios. And all of the organizations that I work with that are dealing with, vital issues like large sums of money or people's health or safety and quality practice with scenarios. They run scenarios with their employees, but we don't do that in education, and I don't understand why not. And we are lucky in many businesses and in education to find mentors to help us work our way through those scenarios so that we can actually learn something from them rather than just read them and then not really know how to deal with them. So we are back to our three. The only one left is knowledge. I don't have much to say about knowledge. I love knowledge. But knowledge is always, as one of the speakers said earlier in this conference, always in a context. And the context sometimes limits my ability to transfer my knowledge from my academic setting to my business setting, and I have to relearn things. And so when I go from job to job, or when I bring someone from one sector to another sector of different industries, I know that I will have to give them the knowledge, even some of the same knowledge they used to have. One of my most successful hires I want to share with you is a person I hired who was a bartender. And I hired the person to be a computer technologist and a sales manager. And his best knowledge during the interview was how to mix drinks. But we gave him the tests that you saw. And he had fabulous thinking skills, and he had wonderful attributes. And it took him about a day and a half to get the fundamental knowledge to be able to begin being productive in his job. It took him another year and a half to really develop all the knowledge he needed, and now he's a manager of a whole group, a whole team of people. But what we discover over and over again is people who have the skills and the attributes can acquire the knowledge. It doesn't make any difference what industry sector they come from. You don't have to be in retail sales to go to retail sales and be successful. Sometimes you'd be better off if you were in retail sales looking for a leader to bring somebody in from some other sector. Because sometimes when you're on the inside of a context, you don't have the creativity and the innovative vision to see things a new way. We're talking about the executive, and that's as far as I'm going to get today. There are other levels of the testing tools that we talked about, and I showed you the data from. that are for professionals. And when you're dealing with professionals, knowledge is much more important. You can't be a good lawyer without knowing the law. You can't be a good physician or nurse without knowing physiology and healthcare. You can't be a good military leader without knowing all the strategies and all the equipment and all the tactics. And of course, all of those people have key staff members that support their work. And then you get to the bottom level of most organizations, and again, knowledge is less important. Because if you know how to clean a building, and that's a very important job, you can clean any building. You don't say, oh, I can't clean a library. I can only clean cafeterias. So at the bottom and at the top, specific knowledge is less important. In the middle, it's more important. So a little bit of a last look. I'm going to show you some group data. This group data is now taken with this particular instrument, the business professional test. And this is 27 people. In this group of 27 people, we're looking at an attribute. One of the attributes for a professional is to be focused on the problem, not be distracted all the time. So this is a picture of how 27 different people scored. They're all professionals, all in the workforce, on the issue of focus. And their scores, arrayed by color, go from strong, which is blue on the right, to positive, which is yellow in the middle, to not manifested, which is red on the left. And I thought, my gosh, these are all practicing professionals, but 5 of them perhaps need medication. 5 of them cannot stay focused. Would I want one of those 5 in my organization? I give this person a very difficult financial problem to help me with, and 5 of them can't even stay focused on the spreadsheet. We looked at some skills in the same level, business professional. This is a different group of 25 people. This is their overall reasoning scores with all those sub-skills put together into one score. Again, a very wide variance in reasoning skills. Every one of these professionals, by the way, has experience, and they all say that they are good reasoners, every one of them. Except, I can say that I agree for sure with the 3 that are superior, and I agree for sure with the 7 that are in green who are strong, and I have my doubts about the ones in the yellow scores, and I don't see any evidence to support the ones who can't do very well at all on a basic skills test for professionals in business. Would I want one of these people managing my business accounting department? Probably not. So who do I want to hire? People with strong skills and attributes, people with generally positive attributes but moderate skills, people in this category. If I'm a business, and if I could spend less than 70 euros, and I could assure myself that everybody I talked to was in the green box, or at least everybody I talked to was in the middle box and the green box, at less than 70 euros per person, I surely would do that and save myself and my whole team a great deal of problems. Because as a business, I'm now not as an educator, I'm not worried about salvaging a person the way an educator would. I'm simply worried about hiring the most talent I could find. And I don't need to worry about that group in the bottom left, do I? Perhaps my competitor will hire them. That would be nice for me. Yes, we wish, indeed. I'll write a letter. Well, hiring is one of the applications, as you've heard me talk about. The other one, of course, is employee development, because it would help us to know what skills and attributes our people have so that we can put together programs for training. So now I want to complete my presentation. I'll be taking questions afterwards, but I want to complete my presentation by reminding you of my first 3 concerns. We fail to use objective data when we are accepting applications. We fail to obtain demonstrations that people actually have those skills and attributes when we are doing the interviewing, and we fail to put together programs to develop those skills and attributes for our people who we've already hired. And I have 3 suggestions. And I think these 3 suggestions would apply, in my experience, in education, business, military, healthcare, government. And they're simple suggestions. One suggestion: include the scores on objective tests as part of the job application process. Seems so inexpensive and seems so easy. Yes, ask for a resume. Yes, if you wish, ask for letters. Yes, have an interview, but also have some data. We found, by the way, what happens when businesses do this, because our clients do this, we found that sometimes applicants do not want to take the tests. And from the business's point of view, that's just fine. They've eliminated themselves from the process. And since there's always more applicants for the jobs, that's okay. Selecting the final applicants just became easier. We can, if you don't want to take the tests, we don't need your application anymore, it's not complete. Second recommendation: when the interview occurs, figure out a way to have the person demonstrate, show you their skills and their attributes. 2 suggestions. One is use simulations. In other words, ask questions that say something like, we've got this problem in our organization and we'd like to have you help us think about this problem. Think it through with us, would you? Here during our interview with these people that are with me in the room. Simulation. Or, here's a case. This happened to our business or a business like ours, and we'd like to have you analyze the case and talk to us about how you think this case could be resolved. I once was working with a university that used that second method to interview a dean, to interview several deans, candidates. And one of the candidates, they told me afterwards, the search committee told me afterwards, one of the candidates did a great job. They handed the candidate the case that they had made up, and the candidate thought about it for a while and asked some more questions to understand it, and was very collegial and very thoughtful in the response, and the committee was really impressed with that candidate. And then there was another candidate who was handed the case, and the candidate got very angry with the committee, with the search committee, and thought that he was being insulted because he's being asked to imagine how he would solve a particular case or work on a case. And the committee got to see this person display all of these attributes that were uncollegial and unfriendly and arrogant, and immediately decided that we don't need this person to be our dean because it's not going to get better after we hire the person. It was simply asking the candidate to work the case that actually had the impact. But until that moment, of course, everything was just wonderful. And finally, structure training programs for existing managers and employees that don't just work on what to do, but make the person explain why it needs to be done. The explain why part, the explain what if part, is what really builds the leadership and management skills. I worked with universities in particular, and I'm mentioning this because I believe there's probably more university people here than business people. I worked with universities on training deans and training department chairs, setting up faculty development programs for deans and department chairs. There's a lot to learn to do those jobs well. But the important thing is not just the cases, because these people already work at the university, but having them explain why they want to do something this way as opposed to that way. Or what if this were to change and what would they do in that case? That gets them to do the thinking that will help them build their skills so when they really have to deal with situations, they're prepared for them. So we're back to what we started with. Knowledge, mindset, skills, and I certainly don't mean to denigrate knowledge in any way. Obviously, knowledge of the context is vital, or else we're going to get the problem wrong. But we can't look at knowledge only. We must begin to look in our interviewing and training at the attributes and the skills. And that means we must begin to measure objectively what really matters to us. You've been wonderful. I appreciate so much your attention. And I could see by your eyes and by the way your heads were turning that we were connecting at many moments. I'm going to finish now, but I want to invite you to ask questions if you have questions, or to come back for the roundtable that will occur later on this afternoon. There'll be 3 other business leaders with us, and you can ask questions at that time. But I'm also willing to hear questions right now. So thank you very, very, very much. Please, if anyone has a question. Yes. Can someone translate for her?
Sí, me preocupa que las personas jóvenes tienen que emprender. Entonces, se dan circunstancias en las que en la misma empresa hay grupos donde...
She's repeating the question in English.
Sí, y ellos sienten la necesidad en que tienen que ser.
They perceive that they need to be leaders, but both people, they have the same skills. How would you solve this situation between 2 people that want to be the leader in the same department of a company?
I think first, that is a very good question.
Bueno, primero,
If I were the person doing the interviewing, and I have been that person, and I saw 2 candidates who were both potentially strong leaders, I would try to find a way to bring them both into my organization. Not into the same job. I might find a different job for one person or the other person. But I always, always, always hired strong leaders. As I said earlier, if I could get the talent, I will find them a place on the team. So now, from the other side, being the candidate, first I would notice that it's not important for me to destroy my rival. That's not good. Not good. Because that will mean that I would behave that same way in the organization, and ultimately that would be a problem for the organization. So I would try to show my skills and my attributes, but I would not try to say the other person is in any way unacceptable. And I also know one other thing. there is never one leader. There's always more in a team that lead. And sometimes the most important person in the team is the number 2 leader. Because the first person says, well, let's go. And the number 2 person says, yes, let's go. So that person is a leader too. So there's many opportunities to lead. I hope that speaks to your question. Thank you. Okay. I will be up here for more questions. Thank you very, very much.